You cannot kill demons. It's an old tradition. For example, Marie-Louise von France says that every woman now, after the patriarchy, has a small figure on her left shoulder, about 1.5 inches tall, who says to her, you know something, you're nothing. You're absolutely nothing. You're totally worthless. You'll never write works of art. You know why? Because you're a woman, and all women are nothing. And she describes this little figure as a demon. And I heard her, a bunch of women say to her one day, Miss von Franz, can you kill this little demon? She said, no, no, you can't kill him. All you can do is educate him. Welcome back. Ladies, what did you think about the concept of the demon on our shoulder, the result of patriarchy, saying to us that we won't ever be anything?
Well, you know, before we broke also, and in terms of this last clip, you know, I think that's what I'm seeing a lot in both 12-step programs and in just women's groups, is that there's you know, Chris talked about the losing of parts of ourself, and it's like that's what soul retrieval is about. That's what going back in and uncovering the gold, you know, doing that archaeological work, getting rid of some of those patriarchal myths about what women is, and embracing again what the feminine is all about, you know. And if we look at just the natural world and the cycles of nature, you know, women can re-embrace and reconnect through Mother Earth their feminine selves. You know, I believe some things can be very, very simple. Women can connect in community around organic farming, or, you know, cooperative child care, or, you know, I mean, there's so many ways to, that demon, I believe that demon can be educated and that demon can be dismissed.
You do?
Yeah.
Okay. How about you?
Well, what came to mind was I saw Gloria Steinem last weekend speak briefly, and I tell you, she to me epitomizes what I'd like to be when I grow up. Okay. She has a beautiful blend of the masculine and the feminine, in my opinion. But anyway, you know, her famous quote about how we're probably the only group that gets more radical the older we get. Yeah, and I think that's really true. And I think he might have been, someone was talking about that earlier, but that's what came to mind. I was thinking of this demon that he was talking about. I think the first thing that has to happen is women have to become conscious of the demon. All right, you can't change something you're unconscious about, and I think we need to get conscious of it because they act it out unconsciously. Mm-hmm. So women do gather. Women have been gathering for centuries. They do gather. They gather around the kitchen table. They gather around the corporate table. And then they do connect. So I think it's about mutual, once again, consciousness raising.
Mm-hmm. Okay, about us being aware. Let's take a look at another one of our impediments. We'll return to our graphic. Again, failure. You mentioned how you felt about that. Mm-hmm. Failure of women to imagine women as autonomous. This idea of looking at ourselves as separate individuals out of the context of a relationship. Mm-hmm. I recently developed a women's identity group that I'm doing for a local women's recovery treatment program. And it was interesting, in our very first meeting, it's a 4-session curriculum. In the very first meeting, I said to them, you know, I deliberately did not put a section about relationships in here. I said, I don't want to hear about your men. I don't want to hear about your women.
Right.
We're here to talk about you. And when you take all of that focus on relationship, or you take focus on other issues, what comes up is, you know, who am I in my own skin? But it's a very difficult transition, I think, for a lot of women to even picture that. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like, if I look inside, it's going to be hollow.
Well, I think that is a direct result of how society reflects back to us. Misinformation about who we are and who we're supposed to be. Pick up Red Book or Glamour or Elle, and you're going to see some images, both that are truthful and untruthful about me as a woman. You know, the whole concept of Barbie doll. You know, the whole concept of, like, you know, these women are put on the cover of these magazines, and, you know, it's what, 2% of the whole feminine population on the planet are going to look like this, but we're all aspiring to have that size waist, or those size breasts, or that size shoe, or that color hair, or and it's just, it's tragic. But it's like over and over, and through mass media infiltration, you know, 8 hours a day, some children watch 8 hours a day of television. They're getting bombarded with these images of fantasy. Fantasy that pervades their sense of self. And when you look at me as me, if not attached to a man or a woman, a partner, or me as not a mother, or me as not what I do it for a living, really, who am I? And where do you look back to? I think it evokes mother.
Yes.
And what was my mother? and how did I have a relationship with my mother, and how was her relationship to me? And I think therein lies a lot of the work and a lot of the bliss, you know.
Yet at the same time, I think it's important when we see the word autonomous, that most women, when they read that statement, will say to me, they don't want to be autonomous. And what I think they mean by that is that women, as we go back to Gilligan's study, the value system, their morality, their ethics are different. They do see themselves in relationship to the world. They are about connectedness. So when you use words like that, and I see words like that, I understand what that means, and I certainly have had my own journey for autonomy. How am I separate from people? But it's true that women value more connectedness with people. And I think that's beautiful. And I think it's been pathologized recently. Words like codependency, which I just really have a problem with that word. It's been so misconstrued, and it's been used primarily to pathologize women who have been in relationships and adapted to relationships in order to survive and come up with a set of behaviors.
Oh, our menstrual cycle has been pathologized.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Or pregnancy or menopause has been medicalized.
Oh, particularly menopause.
Yes.
Definitely. Well, and you know, when I talk to clients, it's interesting, there's like this window of visibility where, you know, they'll cross 45, 50 years old and they'll be out in the community and they'll feel invisible.
Right.
You know, 55 years old, and we were talking about this in our group the other day, you know, the whole concept of aging and, you know, getting wrinkles and our hair color changing, and how for men, many men, that increases their status and they become more distinguished. I hear from women that we begin to feel invisible.
Right. But as you know, some of the, if we get, once again, like you brought up, we have to look at who does that research, because I'm sure some of you saw Gail Sheeny the other day on TV, and she came up with a really different picture of that. She found out that, and then she also wrote about that in one of her books on menopause, the post-menopausal zeal. And if you come back, as a zeal or zest, anyway, when you come back to what you were talking about autonomy, a lot of women, that's when they will, in their adult development at 45, 50, start to move out in the postmenopausal period and become their most autonomous selves. So I think it's really interesting. We have to look at the research, and we have to look at who's doing it.
And we also have to make room for the individuality of each woman. You know what I mean? I mean, we can generalize and look at populations, but I mean, culturally, we have to be able to accept the differences that occur. And I think age. Age is a specific subgroup. I mean, there's ageism in this culture.
Yes,
you know, the girls are treated differently than adolescents, then they're treated differently than women over 30.
Well, even our vocabulary, the difference between the word girl, lady, and woman, and how, you know, there's a fear sometimes about the word woman, as though that's somehow too powerful for us. Let's take a look at the third element that I wanted to address. Failure of even achieving women to resist sooner or later the protection to be obtained by entering the male mainstream. Now, you touched on this a minute ago when you talked about women sacrificing in order to adapt to maybe some attitudes and expectations around her. Does anything else come up for you about that?
Well, I guess I'm probably not the one to talk to, because I really am pretty radical about this. I don't think that corporate America takes care of men or women. I think the internalized patriarchy and the white male power structure of the corporate world doesn't meet the needs of men or women. So I'm really think that men and women have to go within and look at their own internalized patriarchy and examine whether or not that serves them. And I think that it's in men and women joining together that we are going to come up with a way that's more humanistic, that's going to meet our needs. Because listen to men. I mean, they too suffer from the internalized patriarchy.
Absolutely.
Their desire to be connected to their children, to be home, to have more relationship, what we call their relatedness. So I think it's an issue for men and women, both.
Can you speak, either one of you, could you speak to patriarchy? What do you mean when you talk about this internalized patriarchy?
Patriarchy is the male-dominated system that's been in place. It's you know, and so my opinion on it is it's a male-dominated system. Patriarchy has not always been in existence. There was a a matrilineal or matristic focus on the planet.
That's true.
You know, and the icons and the statues, and have literally, like I said before, have been buried, you know, and war gods have been erected over them. We've like said, as a society, well, we're going to put these women away now and move into the more powerful, and anything that evokes any threatening to that system is retaliated. The recent denial of the Surgeon General is a perfect example of that. You know, here's a man who is overqualified for the job of Surgeon General, and because of, you know, some controversial reasons, which, you know, I think have to do exactly with women's bodies, reproductive rights. You know, he's, you know, proactive about reproductive rights. He's not going to be suitable to be, you know, it's a very dangerous and scary line to walk, and women have to live in that world of the glass ceiling.
Indeed, and I think a lot of women have chosen to live in that world by really not only just adapting to the system, but by stating it as preferable.
Right.
I mean, I know I've certainly heard women say to me, "Gee, I would never want a female doctor. I certainly wouldn't want a female surgeon, because I'd want, you know, somebody who knew what they were doing." So again, there's a statement about how sometimes as women we have a lot of disregard for each other. We need to close. I want to thank you so much for today's interesting conversation. I want to thank you for being with us. Tune in next week as we look at men in community. I'm Mary Crocker Cook. Good night.